When the strange object first appeared in Earth's orbit, no one understood what they were looking at. It was too large to be a satellite, too silent to be a spaceship, and too steady to be a natural rock drifting through space. It hung above the planet like a giant shadow, cold and still, as if it was studying everything below. At first, only a few astronomers noticed it, but within minutes, the news spread across the world like a shockwave. People woke up to alerts on their phones. Social media exploded with blurry photos and confused messages. Some people thought it was a prank. Others believed it was a new space project by some advanced country. But the scientists who examined the structure knew it was nothing Earth had ever built. The surface was smooth and dark, without any visible engines or lights. It didn't spin, it didn't drift, and it didn't make a single sound. It just watched. Across countries, governments hurried to understand what was going on. Control rooms filled instantly. Large screens displayed the object, zoomed in from different satellites and telescopes. Experts argued over what the object might be: an advanced probe, a silent threat, a peaceful visitor, or something completely unknown. The uncertainty was the scariest part. Humans can deal with danger, but not knowing what the danger is makes the mind run wild. Within the first hour, something even stranger happened. Several satellites suddenly stopped responding. They didn't explode, didn't drift away, and didn't show signs of malfunction. They simply went silent. The communication links were cut, as if someone or something had placed a quiet hand over their signals. Governments tried to reboot them, but every attempt failed. It felt like someone had pressed a giant invisible pause button on part of Earth's technology. Many around the world began to panic. People gathered in the streets, staring at the sky, trying to see the object with their own eyes. Even though it was too far away to be visible without equipment, a sense of heaviness filled the air. Rumors spread faster than facts. Some believed the world was under attack. Others thought this was a sign of a new era. A few convinced themselves this was a warning from the universe to change humanity's ways. Everyone had a theory, but no one had answers. Inside one of the biggest observatories, a team of researchers tried to track the object's movements. They expected it to follow some orbit or drift due to gravity, but instead it held its position with perfect stillness. Space never offers perfect stillness. Everything moves: stars, planets, dust. For an unknown object to remain completely fixed meant it had control over forces far beyond anything humans could create. One researcher, after hours of staring at the screen, finally whispered something no one wanted to say out loud. "It's not here by accident." The room fell silent. Everyone understood what that implied. If it wasn't here by accident, then it had arrived on purpose. And if it arrived on purpose, then something had sent it. This realization spread quickly through scientific groups and government agencies. It changed the atmosphere from curiosity to fear. If this was technology from another world, then humanity was no longer alone. And being not alone didn't automatically mean being safe. The object continued to hover without even the slightest shift. It didn't attempt to land, didn't try to hide, and didn't make any direct contact. It just watched Earth, almost like someone standing quietly outside your door, waiting for you to notice them. Hours passed, and tension grew worldwide. Many countries sent signals toward the object: greetings, warnings, questions, anything that might get a response. They tried radio waves, coded messages, and even simple mathematical patterns. But there was nothing. Not a single reply. Meanwhile, television channels ran nonstop coverage. Families sat together, hardly speaking, just listening to experts argue and speculate. Some people prayed quietly. Others tried to continue their day as usual, pretending everything was normal, because the truth was too overwhelming. Air travel slowed, and some airports temporarily shut down. Space agencies grounded their rockets. Stock markets dipped sharply as uncertainty spread. The world felt frozen, waiting for the sky to deliver its next sign. Just when people thought nothing more would happen, all the global communication networks began to glitch. The internet slowed, radio stations suddenly went silent, and televisions flickered. It wasn't a complete shutdown, just a brief, unsettling disruption. Like someone tapping on the world's shoulder, the object still didn't move. It didn't emit light or sound, but its presence felt heavier, almost as if the planet had become smaller in its shadow. More satellites went offline, leaving scientists frustrated and confused. The object was clearly interfering with Earth's systems, but it did so with remarkable precision. It didn't destroy anything. It simply took control. Across the world, ordinary people started feeling a deep uneasiness they couldn't explain. They didn't understand the science, or the technology, or the politics behind it. But they understood human emotion. And the emotion running through every city, village, and home was the same: fear of the unknown. Some people tried to stay calm, telling themselves that if the object wanted to cause harm, it would have done so already. Others thought the silence was a sign of something worse, a slow, careful plan unfolding beyond human understanding. A group of school children in a small town gathered outside, looking up and asking their teacher what the object was. The teacher didn't know what to say. How could she explain something that even the smartest minds on the planet couldn't explain? She simply told them that the world was working together to understand it. And for a moment, that gave them a bit of comfort. In the middle of all this confusion, one thing became clear. Earth was being observed, judged, measured, like a student being watched by an unseen examiner. But no one knew what test they were taking, or what the consequences of failure might be. Scientists continued scanning every part of the object. They searched for openings, antennas, heat signatures, anything that resembled technology they could understand. But the surface was too smooth, too perfect, reflecting no information at all. It felt almost alive in its stillness. As the day turned into night, the entire world seemed to hold its breath. City lights glowed, though many homes dimmed their lamps, wanting to keep things calm. People stayed awake despite exhaustion, glued to screens, waiting for a sign. Even pets acted strangely, pacing or sitting unusually still, as if they sensed something was different. Then something happened that changed everything. Early the next morning, a strange wave washed through Earth's communication systems. It wasn't loud, but it wasn't silent either. It felt like an electronic echo, a deep hum that passed through devices for only a moment. It was so brief that many people didn't notice it, but every expert around the world recognized it instantly. It was a message, not a human message, not a glitch, a deliberate signal. Governments and scientists rushed to decode it. The world waited, hearts pounding, hoping the message was peaceful, fearing it wasn't. And then the translation came. The voice wasn't human. It wasn't loud or harsh. It was calm, steady, and unsettling, like something that had never needed to raise its voice. It said only a few words. Earth has been identified. Response required. Those 6 simple words shook the world more than any explosion could. They meant Earth had been noticed by something far beyond human understanding. They meant Earth was being asked, maybe ordered to do something. But no one knew what kind of response was expected. No one knew what would happen if Earth failed to answer. No one knew if this message marked the beginning of peace, or the beginning of the biggest challenge humanity had ever faced. The world stood still, waiting, wondering, trembling, and above them, the object waited, too quiet, calm, and unblinking. The message that arrived from the silent object in the sky spread across the world in minutes. Earth has been identified. Response required. These words appeared in every control room, every scientific center, and even on some civilian devices that weren't connected to any government network. It was as if the message chose its own path. Some people saw it written in bright letters on their screens. Others heard it as a faint whisper through speakers. And a few even claimed they felt it more than heard it, like a thought someone else pushed quietly into their minds. The strange part was that nothing else followed. No instructions. No explanation. No countdown. Just those 6 words. Leaders from every major nation rushed into emergency meetings. In large halls filled with long tables, monitors, and anxious faces, people tried to decide what Earth's response should be. But how do you answer a voice that came from a structure bigger than any human invention? How do you speak to something that disabled satellites with the ease of turning off a light? Most people didn't know what the governments were discussing behind closed doors. They only saw the tension on the news, the way reporters spoke carefully, as if afraid to say too much. Markets remained unstable, but people eventually tried to continue with their chores, jobs, and routines, though everyone moved slower, distracted by the new fear in the air. In many homes, families gathered around their televisions with hopeful or confused expressions. Some asked each other what the message might mean. Others waited for experts to explain it, but even the experts seemed uncertain. In one living room, an elderly man sat quietly in a chair, staring at the paused news screen. He had lived through wars, disasters, and a lifetime of changes, but he had never seen the world so unsure. His young grandson sat on the floor nearby, playing with a toy and asking simple questions like, "Why is everyone scared?" The man didn't have an answer. He wished he did. After several hours, officials from different countries decided to try sending a reply. They debated every word, every tone, every possible misunderstanding. They knew they couldn't send something aggressive or fearful. They also didn't want to sound weak. In the end, they agreed on a simple message. "We acknowledge your contact. Please explain your purpose." The message was transmitted through multiple communication channels, radio, encoded signals, even laser pulses. They sent it again and again, hoping the object would receive at least one copy. The world held its breath. Nothing happened. Minutes passed. Then an hour. Then 2 news channels showed empty podiums where leaders were expected to speak, but they stayed inside their conference rooms, watching screens, waiting like everyone else. Scientists kept an eye on the strange object in the sky, hoping for any sign of movement. But it remained still, quiet, and mysterious, as if it were thinking. Around the globe, people started questioning everything. Why was Earth asked to respond? Why now? And how long did they have? Some people believed the message was just the beginning, like a knock at the door. Others feared the silence afterward was a warning dot as evening approached in some countries and sunrise in others. Something changed. The object finally emitted a faint glow, a slow ripple of soft light that traveled across its surface and faded. Telescopes captured it instantly. It was the first real sign of activity since its arrival. And the second message came. This time, the voice wasn't only heard through machines. Many people claimed they felt it inside their minds, like a calm presence stating something simple but unsettling. The message said, "The galaxy has submitted. You remain unregistered. Explain your refusal." This caused even more confusion. Refusal? Earth had never refused anything. Humanity didn't even know about the existence of a galactic authority or ruler. Why would this entity think Earth had rejected something? Inside the emergency conference rooms, the message caused chaos. Leaders spoke over one another, raising questions no one could answer. Was this a misunderstanding? Was Earth supposed to know something it didn't? Or had humans been observed for much longer than anyone realized? In a research center in Europe, a team of analysts listened to the recording again and again. They slowed it down, filtered the frequencies, and compared it with known patterns. The voice seemed emotionless, but not threatening. It sounded more like a judge stating facts than an invader issuing demands. One researcher suggested that maybe the galaxy the message referred to wasn't organized the way humans imagined. Perhaps countless civilizations had encountered this entity before, and Earth was simply the last planet to face the same expectation. That idea scared people even more. If other worlds had submitted, what had they submitted to? And what had happened to them after that? Outside, crowds gathered in public squares. Some held signs asking for peace. Others called for unity. A few stood silently, looking at the sky as if hoping the object would reveal its purpose. In a small cafe, several strangers sat together, sharing their thoughts. One person, who had been studying ancient cosmology, mentioned the possibility that Earth had been under observation for centuries. Another person argued that humanity wasn't ready for cosmic contact. A third said maybe it was all a misunderstanding and the entity simply needed clarification. Back in the official meeting rooms, the leaders decided to send another message. This one would be clearer. It would say that Earth had not refused anything because it had never been contacted before. They hoped that explaining this might calm the situation. Technicians prepared the message. Every wire, antenna, and transmitter hummed with energy. The message was sent repeatedly, carried through space in every direction. This time, the reply came instantly. The voice returned, steady as always. Observation of your species indicates defiance. Submission was expected. Clarify your position. This statement caused a new kind of fear worldwide. The idea that humans had been watched, studied, without knowing it, made everything worse. People started questioning their entire history. If someone had been observing Earth, what moments had they watched? Human wars? Environmental changes? Social conflicts? Everyday life? Maybe the entity interpreted Earth's unpredictable nature as disobedience. In a small apartment, a teacher sat at her dining table reading the latest update on her tablet. She couldn't believe that the world might be judged based on behavior no one knew was being evaluated. She thought of her students, their laughs, their chaos, their endless questions. How could any outside intelligence expect humans to behave perfectly when even children didn't understand perfection? In another part of the world, a farmer leaned on his tractor, staring at the foreign object. He had lived his whole life connected to the land and seasons. The idea that something from beyond the stars was reviewing Earth like a test was too strange for him to fully accept. He simply hoped whatever was happening would pass peacefully. Meanwhile, scientists discovered something new. They noticed that the object wasn't just hovering. It was slowly adjusting its position to stay above major population centers. Not to threaten them, but almost as if trying to better observe them. The movement was smooth, gentle, but deliberate. This changed everything. Experts realized that the entity wanted to understand Earth's reaction. Its movements were like a silent question. What will you do? Will you obey like others? Or resist? Or negotiate? Back in the main emergency conference room, people debated endlessly. Some argued that Earth should cooperate with the entity to avoid danger. Others insisted that humanity had a right to independence, even if they didn't fully understand what they were resisting. But the truth was simple. No one knew what the right response was. Late at night, in a quiet research lab, a young intern studying communication patterns had an idea. Maybe Earth needed to send not words, but a demonstration. Something that showed Earth wasn't refusing out of rebellion. It simply didn't know the rules. The intern suggested transmitting Earth's history in sound waves, music, languages, scientific achievements, cultural stories. Something that represented humanity honestly, its curiosity, its mistakes, its growth, its struggle, its unity during hard times. The idea spread quickly. It felt natural, human, and peaceful. Something that didn't show power but understanding. After hours of preparation, Earth transmitted the signal. A collection of human voices singing, children laughing, people speaking different languages, soft music, radio waves from decades ago, even recordings of natural sounds like rain, waves, and birds. The message wasn't perfect. It wasn't strong. It wasn't clever, but it was human. For several long minutes, there was silence. The object stopped glowing. It didn't move. The world waited, wondering if the message had reached it, wondering if it understood, wondering if this was enough. Then the object pulsed with light again. The voice returned. But this time, it sounded different, slower, almost thoughtful. Your species seeks clarity. Your history indicates independence. Further evaluation required. The message didn't solve everything. It didn't bring peace. But it brought something new. Time. The world exhaled. For the first time since the object's arrival, people felt a tiny hint of hope. Earth hadn't been rejected or punished. It had been given another chance to explain itself, to show who it really was. But everyone knew this was only the beginning. The next moments would shape the planet's future in ways no one could predict. And somewhere above, floating silently, the object continued its patient watch, waiting for Earth's next move. After the first exchange with the object, a new sense of urgency swept through Earth. People realized that the strange presence hovering above was not just observing. They were being studied in ways that no one had imagined. Ordinary citizens went about their days with an underlying tension, feeling like invisible eyes followed every move. Even in quiet neighborhoods, the streets seemed heavier, the air more watchful. It was as if the world had shrunk under a single patient gaze. Inside a research facility, far from the cities, a group of scientists worked tirelessly to understand what the object wanted. They analyzed the messages again and again, breaking them down into frequencies, patterns, and repetitions. One scientist noticed subtle changes in the voice, tiny shifts in pitch, pauses that seemed almost human, as if the entity was thinking, considering, testing. It was fascinating and terrifying at the same time. Among the researchers, one physicist stood out. Known for careful observation and curiosity, she spent hours examining old astronomical records, looking for anything that might explain Earth's unique situation. She noticed something strange. Hidden in the data were signs that, over centuries, Earth had been observed in ways that no one understood. Certain natural disasters, unusual animal migrations, even random changes in human behavior appeared to align with unknown cosmic events. She began to suspect that Earth had been monitored long before anyone realized. She shared her findings with the other scientists and world leaders. The room grew silent as the implications sank in. If the planet had been observed for centuries, it meant that humanity had been unknowingly tested, measured, and studied. Every achievement, every failure, every moment of unity or chaos might have been recorded and analyzed. It was a lot to take in. Some people found it terrifying. Others felt a strange sense of pride. Humans had lived their lives fully. Even under observation, without knowing it, governments debated what to do next. Should they attempt to communicate more directly? Should they send more complex signals? Or should they wait and see what the object wanted? Every choice seemed risky. A wrong move might make the entity angry. But doing nothing also felt dangerous. The scientists argued passionately, presenting evidence, running simulations, and exploring every possibility. Their discussions stretched late into the night. Meanwhile, ordinary people responded in their own ways. Some families gathered to talk about what it meant to be human, to live freely, to make choices. Others wrote messages they hoped could reach the object, sharing their thoughts, hopes, and dreams. A few children, innocent and unaware of the danger, looked at the sky and asked simple questions like, why are they watching us? Their honesty reminded adults of the beauty of human curiosity, something that no observer could control. The scientist who had discovered Earth's long-term observation suggested a new approach. Instead of trying to explain humanity with words or signals, she proposed showing it through action. She believed that the object was not merely interested in responses, but in patterns, behaviors, and decisions. Humans were unpredictable. That unpredictability might be their strength. She argued that if the planet could demonstrate unity, creativity, and problem-solving, it might show the entity that humanity was capable of more than it realized. The proposal inspired new projects. People across the world started small, coordinated efforts. Communities shared stories, music, and art. Scientists recorded and transmitted experiments showing human ingenuity, from simple mechanical inventions to complex problem-solving. Musicians played together across continents, creating harmonies that represented the diversity of human culture. Children drew pictures of their homes, cities, and dreams. Each act was a quiet message, a small demonstration of what humans could do when they worked together. As these efforts grew, the entity above seemed to respond in subtle ways. The object's surface glimmered occasionally, pulses of light that seemed synchronized with transmissions from Earth. Scientists noticed that its energy patterns shifted slightly when humans acted creatively or cooperated. It was almost as if the object was watching, not just for obedience, but for evidence that humans were capable of understanding, adapting, and caring for one another. The realization changed the mood of the world. Fear was still present, but it was mixed with determination. People began to see themselves not as helpless observers under a shadow, but as active participants in a cosmic conversation. Families shared more stories. Neighbors helped each other more openly. Cities coordinated energy-saving programs and public projects to show unity. Even small acts, like planting trees or cleaning streets, became part of a global effort to demonstrate human cooperation. Within the research facility, the scientist who had started the project worked on another level. She developed a system to combine the messages from Earth art, music, science, culture into a single, coherent transmission. It wasn't just signals. It was a story, the story of humanity, sent as one continuous wave across space. She thought carefully about the pacing, the tone, and the content, making sure it reflected the truth of human life. Creativity, curiosity, struggle, mistakes, and courage. The transmission went out through the largest satellites and communication arrays on the planet. For hours, Earth broadcasted itself into the void, a planet sharing its story honestly and openly. People watched the skies and screens together, waiting, wondering if the object would understand, if it would respond, if it would judge. And then it did. A soft ripple of light traveled across the object's surface. It was slow, deliberate, and unlike anything Earth had seen before. Scientists noted that the light patterns were almost like a language, not one that humans could read, but one that clearly indicated awareness. The message seemed to reflect a form of acknowledgement, a pause of consideration, as if the object was processing everything humanity had shown. The scientist felt a mixture of relief and awe. Humanity had shown itself, not through obedience, but through expression, through creativity and collaboration. And for the first time, it seemed that the observer above understood that humans were not merely another planet to control. They were a unique species, unpredictable and capable in ways that no algorithm or automated system could calculate. Across the globe, ordinary citizens noticed subtle changes too. Animals seemed calmer. The sky appeared less oppressive, even though the object remained above. Children slept more peacefully, unaware of the larger implications. People began to talk with neighbors more openly, sharing concerns, stories, and ideas. The world didn't fully understand why, But a sense of quiet optimism began to take root. Even governments felt the difference. Leaders began coordinating, not just for safety, but for communication. They shared data openly, collaborated on scientific research, and allowed cultural and artistic projects to flow between nations. It was not perfect. There were still disagreements. And old conflicts persisted, but a new energy was present. One focused on showing Earth's strengths rather than hiding its weaknesses. The entity above did not speak, again for a long while. But the subtle signals continued, light pulses, shifts in energy, small changes in orbit, always observant, always deliberate. It was a reminder that Earth was still under evaluation, but the tone had changed. Humanity had moved from confusion and fear to understanding and demonstration. The scientist reflected on everything that had happened. She thought about the small acts of people around the world, children drawing pictures, families singing together, scientists solving problems collaboratively. None of these acts alone could communicate the complexity of humanity, but together they told a story of life lived fully, honestly, and with curiosity. That story was now traveling beyond the planet, reaching an observer that had never before encountered anything quite like it. The world had changed in subtle ways. People were kinder to each other, more aware of shared responsibility, and more willing to work together. Fear was still present, but it was no longer paralyzing. Instead, it became a quiet motivator, pushing humans to act in ways that were thoughtful, creative, and meaningful. And somewhere above, the object continued to float silently, its surface glowing faintly as it processed everything. It was still a mystery, still powerful beyond human understanding, and still holding the fate of the planet in its awareness. But humanity had taken a small step forward. They had spoken without words, acted without coercion, and shown that life on Earth was not to be measured only by obedience, but by creativity, resilience, and choice. The scientist smiled quietly as she watched the last of the transmissions leave Earth. It was a moment of pride and hope. Humanity had faced the unknown, and though the future remained uncertain, they had shown that they could be seen, and perhaps even understood, not for their fear, but for their courage to live authentically. And for the first time since the object arrived, people across the world felt a connection, not just to each other, but to something larger, something that observed silently yet patiently, waiting for humanity to reveal its true self. The object remained in orbit, silent but aware. The story of Earth had been sent. Now the next chapter depended on what the observer would see and how humanity would continue to act. After months of observation and careful communication, the object above Earth began showing more noticeable signs of awareness. Its faint lights pulsed rhythmically, almost as if it were trying to understand patterns, and scientists noticed subtle changes in its position. Unlike before, when it seemed distant and impartial, the object now appeared engaged. It was responding to Earth's signals, though not with words humans could fully understand. The pulses were measured, deliberate, and somehow attentive. People on the ground felt it too. The once oppressive presence in the sky no longer felt entirely frightening. There was still uncertainty, of course, but mixed with it was a strange curiosity, a sense that Earth's efforts were being noticed, considered, and perhaps appreciated. Families gathered in backyards, parks, and terraces, gazing at the sky together. They didn't know if the object could see them in detail, but they hoped their collective presence might matter. Children waved their hands, sang songs, and shouted greetings toward the sky, as if they could bridge the distance with simple gestures of life. Meanwhile, scientists and engineers worked tirelessly on a new project. They wanted to do more than transmit signals or cultural expressions. They wanted to show action. They wanted to demonstrate that humans could cooperate on a global scale, solve problems creatively, and respond collectively to challenges. The idea was simple but ambitious, a global demonstration of human collaboration that could be observed in real time by the object. Communities around the world were invited to participate. Cities coordinated energy-efficient projects. People planted trees, cleaned streets, and rebuilt neglected public spaces. Schools organized science fairs and art exhibitions, and local groups recorded performances of music and dance. Even small villages joined by showcasing their traditional crafts, songs, and festivals. Every act, no matter how small, was recorded and transmitted toward the object dot in one coastal town. A group of fishermen helped build a floating art installation using recycled materials. They worked together for days, designing shapes and patterns that reflected both their local culture and the universal human spirit. As they finished, a nearby drone captured their efforts, sending the images and videos toward the object above. The work was not about impressing anyone. It was about showing dedication, cooperation, and creativity. But somehow, it felt important, like these actions were being watched for more than just observation dot in cities. Large displays and performances were arranged. Groups of students painted murals illustrating human history and achievements. Scientists launched simple experiments showing how humans solved complex problems with collaboration. These experiments weren't sophisticated by interstellar standards, but they carried meaning. They showed effort, intelligence, imagination, and persistence. It was as if humans were saying, "We may not be perfect, but we are capable of thought, creativity, and unity." The object pulsed again, brighter this time. It wasn't a dramatic explosion of light, but a subtle, calculated display that seemed almost responsive to the collective activity on Earth. Scientists speculated endlessly about what it meant. Was it approval? Curiosity? A sign that Earth's efforts had been understood? No one knew, but the reaction gave people hope and motivation to continue dot in remote areas. People contributed in ways that didn't require advanced technology. Farmers sent images of crops growing. Village elders shared traditional stories and songs, and children performed dances that had been passed down for generations. Even people who had never considered themselves part of a global project felt connected. The idea that their small actions could be seen and valued by something so vast inspired a sense of unity that was new to the world. For the first time, the object seemed almost like a silent participant in human activity. Its presence encouraged cooperation rather than fear. Governments coordinated efforts more efficiently, sharing information and resources openly. Scientists across countries collaborated on a scale they had never achieved before. Cultural organizations exchanged ideas and performances in real time, sending a continuous stream of creativity and innovation toward the object. Amid all this, the world also faced challenges. Not every plan went smoothly. Some communities experienced setbacks, natural disasters, or technical difficulties. But even these problems became part of the demonstration. Humans didn't hide their struggles. They showed perseverance, adaptability, and problem-solving. The world sent videos of people working together to overcome obstacles, repairing damage, and finding new solutions. It was not perfection, but it was real dot. As the days passed, the object's responses grew more apparent. Light pulses became more rhythmic and coordinated, as if acknowledging specific actions. Scientists suggested that the object was tracking patterns of collaboration, measuring human initiative, and perhaps learning about social organization. It was clear that what humans did mattered in ways that were visible to the observer above. In classrooms, teachers encouraged children to understand their role in the global effort. They explained that every small action helping a neighbor, planting a tree, creating a piece of art, was a signal of humanity's collective ability. Children responded with enthusiasm, drawing, singing, and performing, often unaware of the cosmic significance of their actions. yet contributing in ways that mattered deeply. In one city, volunteers organized a large public performance that combined music, dance, and art. Thousands participated, forming patterns visible from satellites. The event was streamed and recorded, creating a living mosaic of human creativity and cooperation. Scientists studied the images, noting that the object's energy patterns shifted during the performance. It was subtle, but the response was undeniable. The observer was reacting to human effort, not just observing. People began to feel a connection to the object that was more interactive than before. They didn't speak to it in words, but through action, dedication, and collaboration. The message was clear. Humans could communicate through life itself, through their choices, creativity, and cooperation. At the same time, experts debated what the object's next expectations might be. Some argued that Earth needed to demonstrate even more complex collaboration, like solving large-scale scientific or environmental challenges together. Others suggested that humanity simply needed to continue living fully, honestly, and openly, showing resilience and compassion in everyday life. Amid these debates, ordinary life continued. Families cooked meals together, children played outside, workers helped neighbors, and communities celebrated their achievements. Every small act became part of the larger message. Even ordinary gestures of kindness were recorded, transmitted, and considered. Earth was demonstrating its humanity not through words or rules, but through life itself. For the first time since the object arrived, people felt that their lives mattered on a cosmic scale, not as individuals, not as nations, but collectively. Every small choice, every act of creativity, every instance of collaboration contributed to a global statement of human identity. Scientists and officials realized that this approach was not just symbolic, it was effective. The object's responses, though mysterious, indicated that the observer was understanding human behavior in a way that went beyond numbers or logic. It seemed to recognize patterns of cooperation, creativity, and resilience. At night, the world looked up together. People in different time zones saw the object shining softly against the dark sky. Families, friends, and strangers felt connected, knowing that their efforts were being witnessed. Children waved their hands, people sang songs, and communities celebrated quietly. Even small moments of joy, laughter, and togetherness were part of the message. By the end of the month, the scale of human participation had grown beyond anything anyone imagined. Millions of people had contributed in some way, directly or indirectly. Cities, towns, and villages had coordinated projects visible across the planet. The transmission of human effort was continuous, reflecting life on Earth in its complexity, unpredictability, and beauty. The object above continued to pulse and shift, maintaining a calm, deliberate observation. It was clear that humanity's actions mattered. Every choice, every display of creativity, and every act of cooperation was part of a dialogue without words, a demonstration of what it meant to live as humans. And yet, the story was not complete. Earth had shown initiative, resilience, and collaboration, but the observer was still patient, still measuring, and still waiting. What would come next depended not on fear, but on the continued willingness of people to act, to create, and to work together as one species. For the first time, humanity felt not just the pressure of observation, but the possibility of understanding, recognition, and connection on a scale that no one had ever imagined. Life on Earth had become a silent message to the cosmos, sent through action, creativity, and unity. And somewhere above, the object remained, quietly, patiently, attentively watching, waiting to see what humans would do next. As the days passed, the object above Earth continued its silent observation. Its subtle pulses and shifts in energy seemed almost like a conversation, though humans could not hear words. Instead, the world responded in action. Communities continued to cooperate, families continued to share, and people of all ages contributed in ways both small and large. Yet a sense of tension remained. Earth was still being evaluated, and no one knew what the final judgment or decision might be. One morning, the first clear sign of direct interaction occurred. Across different regions of the planet, electronic devices flickered and hummed in unison. Street lights pulsed softly, televisions and radios briefly synchronized, and phones displayed strange symbols alongside familiar text. At first, people panicked, thinking it was a technical failure. But the symbols weren't harmful. They were precise, patterned, and deliberate. Scientists quickly gathered to analyze what was happening. After hours of decoding and cross-checking, they realized that the patterns were a response to Earth's transmissions, a way the object seemed to communicate without words. The world had acted, and the observer had replied not with instructions, threats, or judgments, but with signals that indicated it was paying attention. The message was clear. The object had acknowledged humanity's efforts and creativity. This revelation caused a wave of cautious excitement. People celebrated in quiet ways. Children danced in the streets, adults shared meals with neighbors, and communities continued projects with renewed energy. The recognition from the observer created a sense of connection that transcended fear. For the first time, many felt that Earth was part of something larger than itself, yet still distinctly human. Even as hope spread, the object's behavior reminded everyone that the evaluation was far from over. Its subtle shifts suggested that it was testing humanity in ways that could not be predicted. Scientists hypothesized that the observer might now expect humans to demonstrate more than creativity and cooperation. Perhaps it was looking for problem-solving on a larger scale, something that showed the ability to face challenges collectively and adapt intelligently to new situations. Leaders and scientists began coordinating globally, not just for communication, but for demonstration. They encouraged nations to share resources, exchange knowledge, and address challenges collaboratively. Environmental projects were scaled up, forests were replanted, rivers cleaned, and renewable energy sources implemented together. Communities showcased solutions to social problems, like public health campaigns, education programs, and food distribution networks. Every initiative was recorded and transmitted, forming a living representation of human adaptability and responsibility. Meanwhile, people continued to act in small, personal ways. Neighbors helped each other rebuild homes after storms. Children created art that reflected their understanding of the world. Families wrote letters to the skies, describing hopes, fears, and dreams. Even acts of kindness, which might have seemed insignificant before, now became part of the planet's silent message. Every effort mattered. Scientists noticed a new pattern. The object's energy pulses became more responsive to collective action. When humans worked together, creatively and effectively, the pulses strengthened and formed subtle sequences, almost like a heartbeat. It was clear that the observer could sense cooperation and persistence. The world had moved from simply being watched to being measured, evaluated, and understood through its actions. Amid this global effort, unexpected challenges emerged. Some regions experienced natural disasters, technical failures, or social disagreements. However, instead of hiding these difficulties, communities addressed them openly, demonstrating problem-solving, resilience, and collaboration. Videos and reports of these efforts were sent toward the object, showing that humanity could face adversity without collapsing, that it could adapt, support one another, and continue forward despite setbacks. In one small town, a group of engineers worked to repair an old bridge damaged by flooding. They had limited materials, limited tools, and limited time, but they collaborated, shared knowledge, and improvised solutions. Children brought water and food for the workers, while neighbors offered advice and encouragement. When the bridge was finally rebuilt, It became a symbol of human ingenuity and determination. The reconstruction was recorded and transmitted, joining millions of other demonstrations from around the globe. Across oceans, students organized a global science experiment. They shared data, compared results, and worked together through online platforms. The project showed that even with distance and language differences, humans could collaborate effectively, share knowledge, and reach common goals. Every step of the project was recorded and transmitted as part of Earth's ongoing effort to communicate its capabilities to the observer above. Meanwhile, ordinary life continued. Markets operated, schools taught, farmers harvested, and families celebrated birthdays and festivals. But now, each action carried additional meaning. Every choice became a small, conscious demonstration of human values, creativity, and resilience. People acted not only for themselves, but as part of a collective message that represented life on Earth. Scientists noticed something extraordinary. The object's energy patterns had become remarkably sensitive to specific types of human effort. Collaborative actions, creative solutions, and acts of kindness caused subtle shifts in its pulses, while isolated, careless, or destructive acts produced smaller responses. It was as if the object could sense the moral and social dimension of human behavior, not just the physical or technological. Humanity was no longer only observed for what it could achieve, but for how it achieved it. This realization inspired a new level of participation. Communities intentionally sought ways to combine creativity, cooperation, and responsibility in meaningful ways. City planners designed public spaces with input from local communities. Schools encouraged projects that addressed environmental and social problems. Families shared skills with neighbors and created networks of support. Even small towns in remote areas joined global efforts, their work amplified through technology and transmitted to the observer above. The object continued to respond. Its light pulses, subtle movements, and energy shifts were carefully monitored. Scientists suggested that the observer might now be evaluating long-term sustainability, the ability of humans to plan collectively, and their capacity for thoughtful adaptation. Every choice mattered. Every action was part of the ongoing demonstration. Despite the immense pressure, humanity continued. Fear was present, but it no longer dominated life. Instead, determination, creativity, and collaboration became the driving forces. People discovered that they could work together in ways they had never imagined, that even small acts could have cosmic significance, and that perseverance in the face of uncertainty was powerful. For the first time since the object's arrival, there was a global sense of purpose. People acted not just to survive or to please an observer, but because they understood that living fully, responsibly, and creatively was valuable in itself. Families, communities, and nations found unity through shared effort. The world had become a living demonstration of resilience, intelligence, and compassion. One night, in multiple regions, people gathered outdoors to look at the sky. Children pointed, adults whispered, and families held hands. The object above glimmered faintly, as if responding to the shared human presence. No words were exchanged, but the connection was undeniable. Humanity had moved from passive observation to active participation, demonstrating its strengths, creativity, and capacity for collaboration in ways that no previous civilization had ever managed. Scientists reflected on the unprecedented nature of this interaction. Humanity had communicated without language, without traditional signals, and without coercion. Through life itself, through choices, creativity, cooperation, and perseverance, Earth had conveyed its identity, values, and potential. The observer above was no longer merely testing. It was learning, understanding, and perhaps even respecting the unpredictability, resilience, and ingenuity of human life. Even as hope grew, Earth remained cautious. The observer had not given instructions. issued commands, or made demands. Its attention was measured and patient. Humanity understood that the next stage could be crucial. Continued cooperation, creativity, and problem-solving would be essential, as the object's evaluation might now include both short-term ingenuity and long-term sustainability. The world continued to act. Schools, families, communities, and nations contributed in countless ways. Life went on, but every action carried additional meaning. Every small gesture, every act of kindness, every collaborative solution was now part of a silent conversation with the universe. Humanity was no longer just observed, it was participating, proving that even in uncertainty, life could be meaningful, purposeful, and creative. And above it all, the object remained silently attentive, its presence calm yet commanding. It seemed to measure more than efficiency or intelligence. It observed intention, unity, and effort. Humanity had begun to demonstrate that it could meet challenges collectively, act responsibly, and communicate values through life itself. The future remained uncertain. The observer had not revealed what would come next, but Earth had learned something vital. Its strength was not in fear or power, but in creativity, collaboration, and resilience. Humanity had shown that even under the gaze of the unknown, people could act with intelligence, compassion, and ingenuity. And somewhere high above, the object continued to watch, waiting for the next demonstration, the next act of collaboration, the next choice that would define what it meant to be human. After months of careful observation, communication, and collaboration, Earth had become a planet alive with purpose. People everywhere understood, in a way they had never before, that their actions mattered not just to each other, but to the silent presence hovering above. The object had not moved closer, nor had it given any direct instructions. Yet every action taken, every choice made, every collaboration completed felt like a part of a larger conversation, one that was happening across oceans, continents, and skies. For the first time, humanity felt truly united. People had acted not only to survive or improve their own communities, but to demonstrate what it meant to be human, curious, creative, resilient, and capable of cooperation. Every small act of kindness, every shared song, every communal effort to solve problems or create art had become part of a larger, living message. People understood that the world was sending a story of life itself, and that story was being read beyond Earth. Then, one evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon in one hemisphere and rose in another, a change occurred. The object above pulsed with light more intensely than ever before. The pulse was not erratic, but measured, deliberate, almost like the rhythm of a heartbeat. Across the planet, people noticed subtle shifts in the sky. Satellites recorded soft vibrations and changes in energy patterns that scientists had never seen before. It was clear the observer was responding. Governments, scientists, and communities gathered to understand the signals. Analysts suggested that the pulses were not warnings, nor were they threats. They seemed more like acknowledgement. For the first time, Earth had passed a stage of evaluation, not fully, perhaps, but enough that the observer had recognized the efforts and intent of humanity. The news spread quickly. People went outside to look at the sky, to feel the pulse of recognition from above. Children pointed at the object, their faces full of wonder, while adults stood quietly, holding hands with friends, family, or neighbors. A deep sense of pride spread, but it was not pride in power or dominance. It was pride in creativity, collaboration, and the ability to face the unknown together. Scientists suggested the world continue its demonstrations, but now with more focus on sustainability and long-term planning. Communities organized global projects that combined creativity with responsibility, large-scale reforestation, clean energy initiatives, educational programs, and public health campaigns. Artists and musicians worked together across continents, sending performances that combined technology and tradition. Every act was a signal, a statement that humanity was capable of both innovation and care. Ordinary people, too, contributed in countless ways. Families shared meals with neighbors, teaching and learning from one another. Farmers worked together to improve techniques and share resources. Children participated in science projects and art installations. Even the simplest acts, picking up litter, planting a tree, helping a neighbor, were recorded and sent as part of Earth's ongoing story. Every small action mattered. In one city, a group of engineers, teachers, and volunteers organized a massive event in the central square. Thousands gathered to create a living mosaic, arranging colored panels, fabrics, and objects into patterns that symbolized human collaboration. Drones flew above, capturing the event and transmitting it to satellites. The observer above pulsed and shimmered in response, its energy patterns shifting subtly but noticeably. Scientists confirmed that the object was attentive, engaged, and absorbing the demonstration. Across the planet, similar events were happening. In rural areas, children painted murals representing the diversity of life on Earth. In urban centers, musicians coordinated live performances through online platforms, creating harmonies that crossed languages, cultures, and time zones. Communities repaired schools, cleaned parks, and organized activities that demonstrated cooperation. Every gesture was meaningful. Humanity had turned daily life itself into a message for the cosmos. The observer, which had once seemed distant and silent, now appeared almost participatory. Its movements, pulses, and energy shifts suggested understanding, almost like it was processing not just human achievements, but the intentions behind them. The world began to feel that Earth was no longer simply observed, it was recognized. Leaders and scientists prepared for what they sensed could be a final interaction. They knew that the observer might now be measuring Earth's ability to act collectively in meaningful ways over time. The planet had demonstrated creativity, resilience, and collaboration. But could it demonstrate wisdom, compassion, and the ability to sustain life responsibly? Humanity did not know, but it continued to act with determination and heart. Even ordinary life became part of this demonstration. People shared knowledge, worked together, and helped each other. Communities coordinated solutions to local and global challenges. Education programs reached more children than ever before, emphasizing curiosity, cooperation, and understanding. Artists, scientists, and everyday citizens contributed simultaneously, showing that life on Earth was more than survival. It was thoughtful, creative, and purposeful. And then the observer made a change that no one could ignore. For the first time, it shifted its position slightly, moving in orbit so that it could focus more directly on areas of human activity. The movement was subtle, but it carried enormous significance. People noticed the shift in the sky, in the lighting, and even in subtle gravitational readings. It was as if the object was preparing to acknowledge Earth more directly. Across the planet, the reaction was extraordinary. Communities coordinated celebrations, sharing music, art, and stories simultaneously. People lit lamps, projected symbols of cooperation, and displayed works of creativity in public spaces. Children sang songs they had composed, adults created dances and performances, and volunteers shared demonstrations of skill, knowledge, and care. The entire planet became a living, breathing display of human life. The observer pulsed again, with a steady, calming rhythm that seemed almost like approval. Scientists and leaders realized that Earth's efforts had been recognized not because of perfection, but because of honesty, creativity, resilience, and cooperation. Humans had demonstrated their capacity to act together responsibly, to adapt, and to express values that could not be measured by simple tests. ordinary people felt the significance of this moment deeply. Families embraced, neighbors smiled at one another, and children pointed at the sky with wonder. People had shown the observer that life on Earth was valuable, not only for its survival, but for its creativity, compassion, and potential. Every choice, every effort, and every act of cooperation had contributed to this recognition. The observer's presence, once a source of fear, now felt almost comforting. Its pulsing energy and subtle movement suggested understanding, patience, and engagement. Earth had moved from a passive participant to an active one, showing its strengths through life itself, rather than through force or compliance. Scientists documented everything. They recorded the observer's responses, human actions, and energy patterns. They noted that the object seemed to value collaboration, problem-solving, creativity, and compassion. Humanity's greatest strengths were not technology or power, they were intention, cooperation, and the capacity to act together responsibly. In cities and towns, people continued to work together, not out of fear, but out of pride in being part of a connected, conscious effort. Children learned the value of participation, creativity, and kindness. Communities shared knowledge and resources freely. The world had discovered that its strength was in unity, innovation, and compassion. As days passed, the observer continued to watch, but it no longer felt like a test. Its attention seemed to affirm that Earth had proven itself capable of meeting challenges, cooperating on a large scale, and expressing creativity and compassion. Humanity had communicated a truth about itself. Life on Earth was unique, resilient, and capable of choice. And then, finally, a moment arrived that changed everything. Across the planet, subtle signals were interpreted by scientists as a form of acknowledgement, a clear indication that the observer recognized Earth's efforts. The object's surface glimmered with a consistent pulse, brighter and steadier than before. It did not speak in words, but the message was unmistakable. Earth had been acknowledged, respected, and understood. People around the world looked up, some holding hands, some silent, some crying quietly. They realized that humanity had succeeded not through force, not through fear, but through life itself, through creativity, collaboration, resilience, and compassion. The planet had shown that it could act responsibly and thoughtfully, even under observation, and that its choices mattered. The observer remained above, calm and attentive. But the energy patterns suggested a new phase, recognition. Earth had demonstrated its uniqueness, and the world understood that it had passed into a stage of cosmic awareness where its actions, values, and creativity were respected. From that day forward, people continued to live with a new sense of purpose. Life on Earth had become more meaningful because everyone knew that their actions mattered, not just to each other, but to the larger universe. Children learned to value collaboration, creativity, and compassion. Communities shared knowledge and resources. Leaders coordinated globally with greater understanding. Ordinary moments of kindness, cooperation, and creativity became part of a larger, ongoing story of life. And somewhere above, the observer remained, silently watching, not as a threat, but as a witness. Humanity had proven that it could live thoughtfully, act responsibly, and create meaning together. Earth was no longer just a planet under observation. It had become a symbol of life's potential to act, adapt, and flourish in the face of the unknown. Humanity had changed. The world had changed. And above it all, the object continued to shine, patiently, quietly, and attentively, as Earth moved forward into a new chapter of its story.